Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, we have another great show lined up for you tonight, and we've got a new guest that we're looking forward to speaking with a little bit earlier on tonight. He'll be coming on at 7:25, and his name is Mr. Pat McGinnis from the National Housing Party, and they were brought to our attention recently, and we do like one or two of their policies on how to stop mass immigration and the asylum fiasco. So we'll be asking Pat to expand upon those policies tonight. We look forward to chatting with him, a first-time guest at 7:25. Until then, we're going to be talking about today in Parliament and today in British politics. It's going to be another great show. So, folks, if you're watching on X, formerly known as Twitter, please do give us a repost, because that really helps to get our message out. Give us a quote repost as well, and that means that we can retweet you. If you're watching on Facebook, please give us a like and a share. And if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that thumbs up button, because it really helps the algorithm to bring our show to the attention of the wider world. It's you, our viewers, that help to get this message out there. So let's use these digital platforms to help get the message out, because without words, there can be no action. Everything stems from the word, as it says. So please do that, folks, and please continue watching our show tonight. We have titled it, "To Save the Welfare State, We Have to Stop Mass Immigration." That is so true. Let's say hello to people tonight. Who was first in? Debbie was first in. Good evening to Alistair. Good evening to you, Debbie, and to everyone watching. Preston Journalist, who was a great guest on our show last week, says, "Hi, Alistair. NHS, road congestion, housing, welfare, and the general dirtiness of Britain can all be linked to mass immigration, both legal and illegal." Absolutely. Goodness me. The number of coming in legally is just beyond the pale, quite frankly. Hi to Oksana. And nice to see Richard in the house, who says, "Hello, Alistair and friends. It's good to be here." And there is the National Housing Party UK TV YouTube page is watching. And good evening to you, sir. I'll give you a wave right back. Lots of good policies from the NHP UK. Please stick around. We'll be chatting to one of their office holders, Pat McGinnis, at 7:25. And hello to Catherine. Now, today in the British Houses of Parliament was the spring statement. Now, it's not quite a budget as such, but it's a kind of, a mini budget, as it were. And Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, spoke at great length about it. And interestingly, she had a lot to say about this and that, but absolutely nothing to say about what's on everybody's minds, of course, which is the sheer volume of people who are coming into the country. That may have escaped her notice. My goodness me, living in the centre of London, how could it possibly escape her notice? But maybe she thinks she's living in a foreign land already, or maybe she doesn't even care. Anyway, she did not have anything to say about it, but she did tell us that she was going to save, was it £5 billion by various welfare cuts. Let's just see what the how this was. Here we go, Rachel Reeve's spring statement. Let's have a look at it. Key points at a glance. Can everybody see that on the screen? I've got a concern now ever since that week that we brought this up and nobody could see the actual articles. If it's on the screen, please tell me. Here's our man. It's there. Let's go. Okay. Everything you need to know as the Office for Budget Responsibility slashes the UK's growth forecast and the Chancellor cuts spending. So despite all the masses of illegal immigrants, it still seems that they've yet to work their magic on the economy. We're always told, of course, that the more immigrants, the better. But it seems like they have not yet, despite their multitude of millions, they have not yet worked their magic. In her spring statement, viewed as another budget and all but name, the Chancellor blamed a world, quote, changing before our eyes. Oh my, she's got that bit right. Blah, 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 blah. Here we go. Economic growth forecast halved. The growth forecast as well, of course, is often nonsense because it's based on the gross domestic product. And so that's not an accurate measure of growth. The accurate measure of growth is gross domestic product per head of per person. If that is increasing, then everybody is doing better. If that's not increasing, then nobody is doing better. But anyway, even though they don't even deal with it per capita, nevertheless, just the simple GDP growth appears to be stagnant. There is a record tax burden now. The OBR warned that Britain's tax burden would hit a record share of GDP under Labour. And the OBR is essentially a government body, it should be added. So the tax burden is increasing, but Labour claimed to have avoided a budget deficit, which means that they calculate more will be coming into the Treasury than going out. And she thinks that because of the 4.8 billion of welfare cuts, that's going to save the day. On Wednesday, the Chancellor said that the OBR now estimates that her package will trim 4.8 billion a year from the welfare bill, and it includes changes to disability and sickness benefits, along with new changes to universal credit incapacity benefits. Well, time will tell if any of that does anything to, as she says, fundamentally reform the British state. Somehow I doubt that fundamentally reforming the British state is going to require a little bit more than 4.8 billion in welfare cuts, quite frankly. I'm sure some of us have ideas of what really needs to happen. And as an aside here, they're going to spend some extra on the Ministry of Defence, in particular, quote, novel technologies, including drones and AI-enabled technology. Well, I would be happier about that if it was drones and AI-enabled technology to help them police the English Channel, because that's where the defense of our country is required. It's not really required in the rest of the world so much as it is required right now to find peaceful ways to stop the invaders across the English Channel. And I'm sure if she wanted to, she could put money into border control. Talking of which, we were inspired by this article by Michael Deacon. There's only one way to save the welfare state: end mass immigration. And this appeared in the Daily Telegraph on the 20th of March, 2025. And he's talking about these cuts. And he says, Liz Kendall, the minister behind the cuts, boasts that they'll reduce the welfare bill by $5 billion. Well, that's what we've just been saying there. To put that figure in context, however, it's less than the amount we spent last year alone on asylum seekers. In total, the UK's asylum bill last year came to $5.4 billion, including $3 billion on hotels. Again, that was for just 1 year. But let's not stop there, he says, because I've got some other extremely uncomfortable facts. For example, in this country today, according to a recent report by the Centre for Migration Control, about 1.2 million immigrants are on benefits. Between them, in the year 2023, they're estimated to have received over 7.5 billion in universal credit. On top of that, the cost of providing them with public services came to 3.5 billion. Do you see the billions here that are being spent on foreign immigrants in the country right now? Now, here are some numbers that are smaller, he says, but still highly significant. Over the past 5 years, the government has spent 27 million on interpreters for benefits claimants who can't speak English. So somebody's getting benefits and they can't speak English. What other country in the world do you go to and you can't speak their language, but they will lavish benefits upon you? It is crazy here in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, police spending on translation services has climbed to over 19 million a year because it would seem many of our criminals can't speak English either. And he works it out. And he says, if your country has a welfare state, it's bound to attract a very large number of people from poorer countries, as a result of which your country will inevitably get poorer and your welfare state will become harder and harder to fund. If, therefore, these Labour MPs truly are aghast at Liz Kendall's cuts, is it not time for them to consider the possibility that Milton Friedman was right when he said that you can either have a welfare state or mass immigration, but not both? Well, you never know. Perhaps Labour MPs will now start eagerly campaigning to stop the boats while shouting, "We need to listen to Nigel Farage. It's time for net zero immigration." On the whole, though, I tend to find this scenario just a touch unlikely. Instead, I suspect these Labour MPs will simply carry on in their comfort zone by calling for benefits to be funded by a wealth tax on the rich. While doing so, they will, of course, studiously ignore the fact that this cunning plan relies on the rich helpfully sticking around to have their wallets emptied. Do we think the rich would do that? I can't help feeling that if they were this easy to fleece, they would never have got rich in the first place. In all likelihood, then, benefits will end up having to be cut again and again and again, even for those who genuinely need them. And everyone in the Labour Party will be even more outraged than they are today. But at least they won't have had to agree with Nigel Farage about something. And in the end, that's the main thing. Michael Deacon, Daily Telegraph, 20th of March 2025. We put that article up on our Facebook page. It's very Very good, and it sums it all up. And on that same issue as well, the fact that all these people are coming over legally and illegally on the boats, or legally actually on the boats, and we'll get into that with our man, Mr. Patrick McGinnis from the National Housing Party, who's coming on at 7:25 in 10 minutes. We'll get into talking about policies to stop the boats, serious policies to stop the boats, practical policies to stop the boats, not pointless, complicated, overly expensive policies, all trying to appease the UN Refugee Convention. No, proper policies built upon defending our island from mass peaceful invasion. And the policies are out there, and we'll be talking about them with Mr. McGinnis at 7:25, just in a few minutes. But in the meantime, found this article as well from the Daily Telegraph, 20th of March. Migrants offered discounts if they film their crossing for TikTok. And what the reporter here has found is that people smugglers are offering migrants a discount for crossing the channel if they film their journey to promote it on social media. Imagine that, okay? They're encouraged by their traffickers to film the journeys and then post them on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook in order to lure others into making the dangerous crossings. In return, they get a cheaper crossing as the footage boosts business for the smugglers. And this tactic was revealed by Paul Bristly from the National Crime Agency, which has been taking down the social media posts in an attempt to stem the crossings. Last year, the National Crime Agency triggered the removal of more than 8,000 social media accounts promoting crossings. 8,000 social media accounts. Now, I presume what they have to do is the government contacts these social media providers and says, you have to take that down. You have to take that post down. That's interesting to know, isn't it, that the government is exercising that power. It says here, now this is a week ago, it says a total of 4,392 people in 80 boats have made the crossing to the UK so far this year. Well, it's more now. I think it's over 5,000 now, I saw. And it says here, the cost of securing passage ranges from £1,500 to £6,000 with discounts. The cost of securing passage ranges from £1,500 to £6,000. Well, that's a little bit strange. I mean, what's the discount that you're offered on a dinghy, for example, that's worth a difference of £4,500? What is like the people who pay £6,000 for a dinghy crossing? Do they get to like sit down the front of the dinghy or something like that? You know, is there a member of the Turkish mafia standing down the front with a trolley? You know, and he like goes down the front of the first few rows and goes, "Would you like a Mars bar?" And the guy goes, "Yes, please." And the guy goes, "Well, swim for it, you little bam." I mean, seriously, what is the difference there? So that's important. That's important to note as well. It's all at our expense, of course. They're all having a laugh at our expense. When what really needs to happen, and we'll get into, is they should arrive in Dover, they should be rounded up, and they should be fast-tracked to prison as entering the United Kingdom in an illegal manner. And that is against the law in the UK. However, if you claim asylum while doing it, it's not against the law. If you claim asylum while doing it, it is illegal. That's the problem. And so that's why none of these people get sent to prison. That's why we have to take them to hotels and put them up. And even if their country is perfectly safe, if they say it's unsafe for them, we've got to go through a whole load of looking at it and investigating it, which takes weeks and months and years. Whereas if we came out of the UN Convention, we could just say, no, we're not giving you asylum. You have to leave or you'll get sent to prison. And you'll be in prison for a set number of years. And you would not have to do that to many people. And you would not have to do it for very long, because the traffic would dry up, because they would realize that it's not worth their while or their time anymore. And that's what needs to happen. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Catherine says, me and my son are laughing at this ridiculous country, but it's not that funny, really. You have to laugh sometimes to stay sane. Christopher says, it's completely untenable. We are subsidizing the third world here. Total madness. Christopher liked that article. It was very good. Richard says, I think the hippies never really went away, but the hippies haven't had that one for a while. But their terrible ideas infected the minds of the political class. Yeah. It's definitely an infection, a sort of globalist, internationalist infection in all of the West, not just Britain, but especially in Britain. For some reason, it hit Britain harder than it hit any of the other European countries. You go to other European countries, there's still some kind of sanity left in some areas, but in Britain, it was like full on, very, very unusual, really. Richard says that many are thinking that somehow Britons will rise up in the near future. Well, people never rise up except through proper leadership. And I think that that's what Britain's been lacking at the moment. But there's lots of people who are coming on the scene, who are providing leadership, providing intelligent ideas and solutions. And you see them more and more now. At least you do on social media. I don't know what the mainstream legacy press is like, but certainly even there you do start to see it, such as that article that I just read out by Michael Deacon. You wouldn't have read that in the Daily Telegraph even 5 years ago. You wouldn't have read something like that. And I think it is the wave of the future, as Richard says here. It's been neglected by foolish politicians, immigration that is, particularly since 1997, but it is the way forward to benefit so many. And so let's talk about the way forward with our guest this evening, who is Pat McGinnis. Please, folks, we're going to bring Pat in. Please say hello to Pat and what he's got to say tonight. Good evening, Pat.
Hello, good evening.
Thanks very much for coming on the show. And I'm looking forward to the things that you've got to say tonight. Now, you were brought to our attention when I watched a video of you talking about the UN Refugee Convention, and we can get to that in a moment. But firstly, I'd like you please just to tell us a little bit about the National Housing Party, and indeed explain to us, while you're doing that, just about the name. It's a slightly unusual party political name, and why you chose that.
Yeah, so I've been campaigning against permanent settlement immigration since 2012. And when I used to go knocking on doors for local elections, I used to always use the housing crisis as the tool, the vehicle to get the vote. And it's very easy to do because we've been in a serious housing crisis for many years. So for various reasons, we started the National Housing Party in 2022, and we actually tried to call it the National Party UK. And they wouldn't let us have it because they said it sounds too similar to UKIP. And that's when I thought, well, we used to always campaign about the housing crisis, so why not put housing in the middle there? And that's what we did. And I just like the name of it, and a lot of people like it. Some people don't like it, but when you're knocking on someone's door with the name like National Housing Party, you don't have to tell them what you're about. They already know by the name what you're campaigning about. And we are a unionist party. We're a Christian nationalist party. So we had UK at the end, which is important for us as well, because if you only have GB, or you're called Britain this or Britain that, you're excluding Northern Ireland. So we'd like to include all of the United Kingdom, and that's how the name came about, so to speak. And
right. Good. I think it is a good name because everybody wants housing. Everybody's supportive of the idea of housing or affordable housing for themselves and so on. So I think that it's not a bad name at all. I like the name, and also like the fact, of course, that you're for the United Kingdom. And you make a good point there about Northern Ireland, because I've seen that before with some of the Northern Irish people feeling left out if they don't see themselves included. So that's good to know as well. Now, I watched a video of yours about maybe 3 weeks ago, and you were in London, and you were talking about illegal immigration versus legal immigration. And you were talking about the UN Refugee Convention from 1951. Now, that's the legal structure under which British government is obliged to operate, because we are signed up to the UN Refugee Convention, and therefore we cannot go against it when we're dealing with people who are coming into the country. And you were pointing out, which most people don't get, is that these people that are coming in are actually coming in legally. Would you like to develop your point there? Because I know this is something that the National Housing Party has been pushing for a while now.
Yeah, well, this goes back a long way, and I noticed that this is going to be a problem probably way back in 2014, 2015. And when UKIP were campaigning to leave the European Union, I was trying to explain to people that in their manifesto, anyone can check this, that they had in their manifesto they're going to stay signed up to the United Nations 1951 Refugee Convention. So it would make no difference whatsoever for people turning up on boats, whether in the EU or not, because the UN's nothing to do with the EU. So this whole problem is so big, people don't understand. Our whole society has been shaped around this notion that we must be nice to refugees, and they're literally cancelling Christian Easter ceremonies in favour of a Refugee Week event to brainwash the children into brainwashing them to accept that the whole of Africa, the whole of Asia should have the right to come here. This is what is going on. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that is what is going on. And, the bottom line is the only way it's going to be solved if people stand up and say, no more refugees. We need to leave the United Nations Refugee Convention to make it illegal for when they turn up on the boats. At the moment, so many people are saying these illegals in the hotels. Why do these people deliberately get caught by the border force? Because they know they're not going to be penalised. And it's completely legal within the United Nations Refugee Convention. Now, as I said earlier, it goes back a long way. And, but the bigger players, like, you know, I know that some of your viewers may like Nigel Farage. I've never been a fan of him, and I emphasised in that video you talk about is that he has chosen to call them illegals because he doesn't want to speak about the Refugee Convention, and that is the root of the problem. So he's chosen to do that, and then because he's calling them illegals, he was then challenged in an interview, are you going to deport the illegals? And he said no. So he's made a big problem for himself when he should have taken the National Housing Party's position is, look, these people are claiming asylum. We need to change the whole system to make it illegal. So once we've left the Refugee Convention, then they will be penalised if they turned up illegal. I mean, even the Rwanda deal, people don't understand that the Rwanda deal was all about protecting the Refugee Convention, because Suella Braverman, who was the chief whatever about it, she kept saying they're illegals, right? So why wasn't she prepared to convict them for a crime of breaking into our country? She didn't, because she wanted to send them to Rwanda and not convict them and not make a deterrent. As we spoke earlier, if you want to protect your nation, you need a deterrent to stop people repeatedly keep trying. We've had multiple examples of Albanian murderers, Afghanistani failed asylum seekers, been deported 3 times, came back, walked down Oxford Street, approaching women, got refused, smashed their head in with a hammer. And this guy had been deported 3 times, a failed asylum seeker. If we had a decent deterrent, like in our policy, we suggest a 3-year prison sentence, and people start saying, no, but why pay the money? Well, you can't just keep deporting people. You know, they're going to keep coming back. So, you know, we've also got an amnesty, not an amnesty to get a British passport, an amnesty from the 3-year sentence. If they haven't committed any serious crimes, they can leave the country. If they give their DNA, fingerprints and photograph, and they haven't committed a serious offence, they're free to go banned for life.
Yes, that's absolutely right, because the Rwandan thing was an attempt to create a deterrent, as you said, within the bounds of continuing to remain members of the UN Refugee Convention.
Exactly.
And the idea was that, well, we'll process them in Rwanda, and that rigmarole will be enough to deter a certain number of them. But of course, most people could see, well, how many people are we realistically going to be processing in Rwanda? There's literally hundreds, if not thousands, in some weeks coming over. Well, certainly hundreds each week coming over. And there's simply not going to be that capacity in Rwanda. And then the Rwandans themselves are going to say, well, actually, we don't want all these people coming over endlessly forevermore either. So the Rwanda thing was just a big waste of time and effort and energy, and didn't act as a deterrent. The only deterrent is for a national sovereign government is prison time. You come in illegally, you go to prison. Yeah, and that's how it should have been from the very start.
I mean, the Rwanda thing was such a joke. They was all calling them illegals, but they weren't going to convict them of a crime to try to break into. They was going to send them to Rwanda. And another thing, they kept saying, "Oh, it's the people traffickers." Well, if I was a people trafficker and I was on one of those dinghies and I got arrested, I'll say, "Well, hold on a minute. You've just let the cargo all claim asylum. So what's illegal about what I'm doing?" You know, it's just a complete joke, and people have got to wake up to it.
That's actually a good point, because Keir Starmer will go on and on about how we will do whatever it takes to stop the people traffickers, but it's the end result of the aim. The people traffickers could say, we're just helping these people claim their legal rights to asylum in the UK. We're not actually doing anything wrong. Okay, we might not be very nice people. We might be charging them an arm and a leg, sometimes quite literally, but it's a legal thing that we're doing. So
2 other very important things, if I may, you know, the documentation thing. So they deliberately destroy their documents, as we all know, and you cannot deport someone who hasn't got documents. If you think somebody's from a certain country and you phone up that country and say to them, right, we got someone here, they're going to want to know their name and their identity. If you can't clarify their identity, they're not going to take them. That's just it's just obvious. I mean, I don't see why people can't see that. And then so you put them in prison. Our policy is 3-year prison sentence, and you stay in prison until you organise your papers to leave. And the bigger problem is, because there's so many now, there's like up to 2 million illegals. And this is why Boris Johnson and people before said, oh, he wants to give them all amnesty, because they're not prepared to detain millions of people and hold them in detention centers until they leave. And our policy, I don't know if you saw this, but we suggest that we need to build thousands of detention centers for these illegals once they're rounded up. And these detention centres can later be turned into social housing for our own people once they've left, because there's up to 2 million illegals. But we would have that amnesty from the 3-year sentence if they took it before a certain date, which we set. Also, if they did come in illegal, they got the 3 years, they could pay a 30,000 get out clause as well. So they're not going to want to come back to get another £30,000 fine. So there's multiple things we can do to sort this problem out. But it's all about detention and the establishment, and even Farage and that, because they keep saying, "Oh, we'll just push the boats back," but that's not a deterrent. We need a deterrent, and they're just going to keep coming back. And the bottom line is, Farage and Reform, they want to continue to accept refugees and stay signed up to the Refugee Convention.
Hopefully, the people who are advising Farage and Reform and that lot will come round to seeing the truth about your point of view on the whole UN Refugee Convention. There's still time for them to do that. Let's hope that they do see sense on that. I like the idea of, it is against the law to destroy your documents when you enter the country. There is a law against that as well. But again, it's not being applied to the channel crossers because the UN Refugee Convention does not punish you if you do that. So again, that's another reason why these people are not being punished when they drop their passport over the side of the dinghy. Also,
a very important thing is, in 2024, there was 100,000 asylum applications in the UK, all through the 1951 UN Refugee Convention. Only 30% of those came in at Dover. So Dover's just a small part of the problem. Another thing people say, oh, but they're going through safe countries. Our government takes refugees from Syria, Iran, Iraq, Eritrea. Anyone from those countries can easily qualify for asylum. If you turn up on a boat, do you think they're going to say, oh, you went through safe countries, we took like 10,000 last week from Eritrea or Iraq, but we're not going to take you because you came the wrong way? They've got to take them, and that's what's going on.
Yeah, under the UN Refugee Convention, there's unlimited millions and millions of people who right now are only limited in their ability to get to Britain.
Yeah.
Because if we go by the letter of the law of the UN Refugee Convention, if half of these people turned up, a case could be made that they are definitely refugees. So again, dealing with that reality means that, in my view, we should simply just we leave the UN Refugee Convention, and then we ensure that we have abolished asylum entirely.
Yeah. Our official
policy on that?
Our official statement on refugees is, in an ideal world, there should be refugee camps. Yeah, if people are generally fleeing for their lives, you put them in a refugee camp to save their lives. They will be happy to be there, right? They stay in the refugee camp. They're never given citizenship ever, and when their country becomes safe, they can go back, or another country is willing to take them. But once you start giving passports out, every time you give a UK passport out to a foreigner, you're giving a little bit of your country away, and that's what's happened. We've given out about between 25 and 30 million UK passports to people who are not British, right? I'm not suggesting we need to deport legally settled migrants, right? However, I believe that they should never have come in the first place. So I'm happy to say that. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to get on with them and stuff like that. But that's my view on the whole situation. So you have temporary refugee camps. You look after them, stop them from being killed or whatever, right? But we are now in a position now that we can't even do that because we're trillions in debt as a nation. We've got 1.3 million people waiting for social housing. we are not in a position to temporarily help any more refugees. I think we've done enough. I think we've helped a hell of a lot of refugees over the years, and we should be proud of that if you want to be proud of it. And the party's over, because you know we're on course to becoming a minority as the native population. You know, there's so many things.
Absolutely, as you say, the party's over. It should never actually have started in the first place, but it went as soon as it got out of hand. As soon as the party got out of hand, the police should come around and knocked on the door and says, "Now's the time to stop it, mate. It's too late in the morning for this carry on." So that's what indeed we should have done. But you're right. You made another point there about the citizenship, and that's also a draw. The ease with which we give out, as you say, passports, by which is meant granting people British citizenship, the ease with which we do that is unbelievable. It really is. If you come across on a small boat and if you get accepted as an official refugee, then you get what's called refugee leave to remain. And all you need to do is stay here for 5 years. And then after 5 years, you can apply for permanent settlement. It's called indefinite leave to remain. And then once you get that, and you always get it, once you get that, then that's you here forever. And if you want, after 1 year after that, the 6th year that you've been here, effectively, you can then apply for British citizenship. And again, you're going to get it, and you're going to get a passport, and then that's you technically British. And that has a huge, I don't know exactly the numbers that have been given citizenship since, for example, the end of World War II, but it's certainly millions of people. And lately as well, under the Boris wave, all these people are going to become eligible for for indefinite leave to remain this year and next year, and then British citizenship. And that's hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people who will change our democracy as well, because they're going to vote. They're not going to vote for people like you and I. They're going to vote for people like Sadiq Khan and his tribe, to be frank.
You'll be surprised on that. Well, that's another discussion, because I stand in local elections. That's what our party's all about. We need to stand in local elections. That's the only way out of this mess, is start at the bottom, work our way up. And I stand in Camden, central London. And but going back to so I'll get a lot of Muslims and stuff vote for me because they want immigration stopped. They're all overcrowded. You know, I've got lots of Africans voting for me. They don't like the LGBT thing. They don't like Khan. They hate Khan. I don't think I've met a Muslim yet who likes Khan. So it's the white lefties who vote Khan in London.
That's interesting to know. Why wouldn't the Muslims like Khan?
Because he's closing all the roads. He supports the LGBT pride event. He wants more refugees in the country, and they don't want any of that. That's why they don't support him. People think he's an Islamist. He's not. He's a woke Muslim. So, you know, there's probably a number of Muslims who vote for him, but where I live, I've spoken to a lot, and they absolutely hate him. But going back to the refugee convention, you know, like I said earlier on, it was created in 1951, and before that, it was unheard of. A refugee would never be given a passport, and basically the whole world was kind of pressured into signing this agreement that if any refugee turns up at your country, you must give them full citizenship and all the rights as the native population. It's clearly written, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. As soon as you get refugee status, you get, apart from your passport, you get all the welfare, work, benefit, rights, social housing, the whole thing, on exactly the same basis as a British citizen, even though you're not a British citizen.
Yeah. And before this, it didn't exist ever in history. So this 1951 UN Refugee Convention, you know, this is like
it changed the West.
It's creating more problems and danger. All the people are dying coming across the channel in the boats. They're creating more danger than what it was created for, to save people. Do you know?
Yes. It's certainly done that, and it's changed the nature of the Western world as far as demography is concerned. It's been like a peaceful way in which to transform the population. Really quite quite.
I've often described it as a communist assault on the planet for a no borders world. That's what it is. It's basically created no borders.
Yes, there's the intention behind it is an internationalist open borders intention, no question about that, and that's been a very powerful attitude in the West post war for whatever reasons. But going back to the thing with citizenship and so on, that's specific to our country. I mean, people get citizenship after 6 years here, essentially, legal immigrants, if they want to claim it. But other countries don't. I mean, that's not written in law. It could be after 25 years. And I would advocate that either immigrants, legal or otherwise, legal or refugees, do not get a pathway to citizenship ever. And if they do, it should be at least a generation, which is to say 25 years of unbroken settlement here, obeying the law and largely paying your own way like the rest of us have to do.
Well, one of our main things in our part, we're a Christian nationalist party, and permanent settlement immigration of foreigners is actually an anti-Christian concept, because you can go to Act 1726. It clearly talks about God creating the nations and the borders. And what do you have borders for? To keep people who don't belong in that territory out. And, our campaign is to make giving UK passports to foreigners a thing of the past. The only way in our policies would be permissible to get into the country permanently would be to marry a UK citizen. But that UK citizen would have to trace half of their ancestry back to the British Isles for 100 years. This would stop all the arranged marriages in the Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities, who are just marrying foreigners, bringing them in, and no connection to our country. So yeah, the only way in our policies would be through a marriage.
Well, that's an interesting one. I would personally, I would say you have to trace your family back to pre-World War II. If you trace your family back to pre-World War II, that guarantees that a member of your family looked like
a British,
the indigenous British population, because 99.9% of people in 1939 looked like you and I. If you put a time limit on it, like 70 years is going to come and go. And so like in a few years' time, 70 years will have been passed, and it'll be like what Britain looked like in 1995, which was completely different. So if you put it fix it at a moment in time and say you have to have a member that looked like that, then I quite like that idea. Actually, that's a good one. Hadn't occurred to me, but that is a big issue, is the arranged marriages as well. I think if they want to arrange marriage, fine, but do it over there and stay over there.
Well, I'm sure there's big money
over here.
I'm sure there's big money involved as well.
Oh yeah, big money, and lots of lawyers living high on the hog on that particular one as well.
So what's the feeling now in Scotland with the unionism and stuff? Is it strong, like to stay in the union?
Well, in 2024, the biggest plebiscite ever, it was 55-45. Good. And I would imagine it's probably still around about that. There's always a hardcore of Scottish nationalists who always make up about 25 to 30% of people, regardless of what. And then you have a floating percentage that doesn't make their mind up one way or the other.
Glad to hear it.
And then you've got your hardcore unionists as well, which are again 25 to 30% of the population. So there's kind of 25-30% in the middle that don't really know that can leap about. But certainly, as far as the fortunes of the SNP has been concerned, it's taken a tanking with after Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf's awful governorship. And there's also here in Scotland, as in the rest of the United Kingdom, there is an upsurge in support for the Reform Party. which is which is estimated to get maybe between 8 and 14 seats next year. So it's all in flux at the moment, and everybody thought Labour was going to win in 2026 easily, but because of Keir Starmer and the general bad news about that, the general poor showing of the Labour Party in London, it's no longer for certain that Anas Sarwar will do as well as was expected. So it's going to be a very interesting election one way or the other, but there's going to be changes. There's going to be changes. And in fact, just reading today, Fergus Ewing, who's been in the SNP since the very beginning, and who's been in the Scottish Parliament since the very beginning, he said that he's going to no longer stand for the party because he doesn't think it's representative of what he calls all of Scotland. But he is thinking of standing as an independent in 2026. So that would be quite good. He's always been a thorn in the side of the SNP, and he's the nearest thing that they've got to a kind of traditionalist, as it were, because the rest are just terribly, terribly woke, and all the sins, in fact, that go along with that. Pat, I know you need to get away for 8 o'clock, so I want to say thank you very much.
I've got one quick story.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind me saying, right? So we had the exit the UN Refugee Convention banner, and we took it to the Conservative conference in 2019, I think it was, or 20. And I came back on the train after the conference, and there was lots of young Tories on the train. And this was early days when the Dover crisis was developing. And I said to them, I wanted to know their opinion, and he was like very dismissive, very looked down at me, and said, "Oh, that's just a minute issue." I was like, "Oh, well, I don't think it is, mate. This is a serious problem." And 2 weeks later, David Amess was murdered by someone whose family came in under the United Nations Refugee Convention. And there's been multiple refugees. What's his name? Abedi, the Manchester Arena bomber. Salman Abedi, that's his name. He came as a refugee. I could name quite a few.
It's terrible. Rihanna White last year got murdered by somebody. She was working at one of these hotels. Just a dinner lady or something like that. And she got murdered. And that's why it's a national security emergency, because it is a physical danger that these people come across here. Is absolutely appalling. And it's upon every single politician who doesn't speak out against it. And it's amazing. And congratulations to you for speaking out against this all these years ago, before it had dawned on the rest of us what the core of the problem was.
Yeah, just wanted to say that the ECHR is not the same as the United Nations. That's only that's only 50% of the problem. The people at Dover don't use the ECHR to get in the country. They use the Refugee Convention to get into the country. They only use the ECHR if their asylum claim fails, and they use the ECHR to prevent being deported.
That's right.
So the Reform Party, they're only saying half the solution. They need to say the other half as well.
Very good point. They use the UN Refugee Convention to get into the country, and they use the ECHR to prevent themselves being deported out of the country. It's two terrible, terrible international agreements that need to be thrown in the bin. So you've got a YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/NHPUK and you've got a x.com/NHPUK official, all one word. That's NHPUK official. That's your X or Twitter account. And you have got a website as well where people can check out all your policies, which is all one word, nationalhousingparty.uk. Great. Pat, thanks very much for your enlightening conversation. It's been very good. Please do keep in touch, and we'd love to see you again sometime. Hope
Thanks
you've
for
enjoyed
having
it.
me on. Christ is King. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good night. Fantastic. Good old Patrick McGinnis there from the National Housing Party. And please do send in your comments there for Pat. Lots of comments there when Hello to We Say It podcast. Derek says, great show. We Say It says, send them all back. Britain is closed. NHP UK TV, you couldn't make it up. Absolutely. A lot of positive comments for Pat there from Catherine, Ken, Budgie, Christopher. Good stuff. Okay, absolutely. Well, folks, in the closing moments of the show, that was a good one. In the closing moments of the show, we like to do a show and tell to remind you that we can only keep this production on the road as a consequence of your support. And we've got various merchandise channels where you can also get t-shirts like this one, and where you can get, for example, this badge. And if you go to our shop, aforceforgood.uk/shop-1, that's a bestseller, that one, an absolute bestseller. People love that one. It's a Union heart with a force for good written through the middle of it. You'll also get lots of different designs, including this tea towel, dish towel, Great British tea towel, which has got the island of Great Britain on it, and it doesn't have the island of Ireland on it. So Northern Ireland's not on it. We're just letting you know that, unfortunately, but it does have the Great Britain island on it. Another thing that's a big seller for us is our Union Jack flag, custom made 3x2, which has got an open hem here that you can put your flagpole into. And it's only 3 foot by 2 foot, so it can fold up into your pocket, and you can put it in your pocket, in your handbag, in the glove compartment of your vehicle for easy deployment whenever you see it. If you see a bunch of people, you think, do you know what? I need to wave this flag in support of them or in support of my cause. You'll have one in your car or your handbag. You'll whip it out, and straight away you are a hero. On top of that as well, our wee book for the Union. We're keeping selling these. They're only a £5, and they tell you all about the philosophy and policy of British unionism, starting from the beginning, the ancient roots of union 5,000 years ago. Great stuff. And you'll also get a link from there to Amazon for this book, but just go on to Amazon straight away, amazon.co.uk, and search for One Big Country, and you'll find volume 1 of a big book for the Union. Working hard on volume 2 at the moment, and it's going to be policies to protect our country. The sorts of policies that we were talking there with our guest this evening. So that'll be volume 2 coming later this year. But for now, get volume 1, please, at Amazon. And it is what keeps this show on the road. And as it happens, folks, that is the top of the hour. Let's have a look at some of your comments. Daniel says, good show, Alistair. James says that he's a poor pensioner, but if he wins the lottery, well, thank you, James, for keeping us in your hopes and dreams. Let's hope you win the lottery. Well done. Daniel says, what happened to Argyle Street? God bless the King. Christopher says, a great guest tonight, spot on analysis of the problems we are facing and the solutions we need to resort to. Absolutely. James gives Pat a thumbs up. Bobby says, Pat does fantastic work. Oksana says, thanks, Pat. Richard says, excellent work, Alistair and the rest of the team. Keep up the good work, says James. And Catherine says, great show and guest. Thanks. Folks, so much love being shown in the comments. We do appreciate it. We will be back next week. And so it just remains for me to say at the top of the hour, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next week.